Namaste. Welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Serenity. We're going to continue answering questions from the jar. I think I have a few more left in here. I'm going to pull out a question. I'm going to take a deep breath. And then I'm going to read the question before I set my timer, just so I know. Okay. I might have added this one before, but we'll answer it again. The question I got is, why is it so hard to sit quietly in a room alone? Why is it so hard to sit quietly in a room alone? Now, this is a question I basically answered in an article I wrote for Mindful Word, 2017, I believe. I was thinking at the time about Blais Pascal's Pensée 139, which is where this question comes from. He says the source of all man's suffering is the fact that he cannot sit in a room alone, quietly in a room alone. In other words, he can't be with himself when there's no distraction or diversion. Because why? Can he sit with himself when there is no distraction and diversion? Is because he has to sit with all that mess he's got going on inside his head. A self-created mess, a construct, a mental construct, nothing more, and not reality. But it is all-encompassing, distracting, and diverting. So what man does is try to distract and divert away from this mental mess by, taking up hobbies and doing anything. It's his busy work and his, types of thinking too that kind of bring him out of the stinking thinking into this futuristic, hopeful thinking that he does as well, planning for a future, anything that takes him out of the moment. So it's the moment that the man finds extremely challenging to deal with. And man, of course, is just a word back in the 1690s, is I think when this quote was written, so 1600s anyway. So it has that patriarchal and somewhat misogynistic type of pronoun usage. But here we know that man means human. So the human can't sit quietly in a room alone because it's so challenging to sit with what's going on inside. We're not basically okay inside as a society. We are always striving, always seeking, always grasping, always clinging, always averting or pushing away that which makes us even more uncomfortable inside. And sitting alone is one of those things we are averse to, one of those things we avoid or push away and don't want to do. What happens when we push away, however, is that we end up pushing down the experiences we don't want to deal with, right? So we're just pushing them down. They don't go away when we push away. We are actually clinging to them in another way, clinging to them and stuffing and storing them, and they become great big whopping samskaras, which are constantly getting triggered by life's challenges, and we're constantly trying to avoid those life challenges that will trigger them. We're trying to create life circumstances that will help us to ignore them and stop them from getting all rattled up inside so they come up and we have to deal with the pain we stuffed them in, right? So we got all that mess going on inside us. And the idea of sitting alone with that and having that going, I think it was, I read one time that there is about 90,000 or 60,000 thoughts a day going on in the human mind, a day, 60,000 thoughts approximately, and 90% of those thoughts are negative, and some and even more are repetitive, meaning it's just a loop recording we got going on around in our heads, and it's very uncomfortable. When we sit in a room alone, we have to deal with that thinking, right? And that thinking is like loud inner music you can't escape from if you don't have the background music of life to drown it out with, right? So when you're sitting alone, that's all you got is your thoughts and your feelings that the thoughts instigate. And you've got those beliefs coming up and those, that conditioning and those fears, because fear is the number one emotion other than love that keeps us stuck and wanting to avoid sitting alone and quietly in a room. We fear what might come up. We fear having to face all those dark shadow selves of who believe we really are enough stuff down inside. We have to face those core beliefs in the subconscious mind, and it's so much more powerful than any thought you might have in your conscious mind, or the core beliefs that exist in the subconscious mind that actually roll and run our lives when we're busy thinking. But they'll come up too, and it's just a mess, right? So it's challenging to sit alone, quietly in a room alone. We want to divert. We want to distract. We want to numb. We want to be able to push away. We want control, this false sense of control over life circumstances. When you're just sitting there quietly, it's like you're at the mercy of life. We don't like that. That's too vulnerable. That's too much of a vulnerable experience, or too much risk of attack from life. So we just don't want to sit quietly in a room alone. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to think. We don't want to be overrun by these thoughts. We don't want to have to face this mess that we've made, because we basically did make it, by stuffing and storing and deciding what about life we'll accept and what we won't, what we prefer and what we want to avoid. We've stuffed and stored these samskaras inside us, and they're constantly rattling around, and it doesn't take much to trigger them, to make them all aggravated and to come up to the surface, so we have to deal with the emotional energy in which they were stuffed. It's not pleasant. Not pleasant. So though people may not consciously know that's why they're so uncomfortable when they're sitting in a room alone, they'll just say, things like, I just get bored. Well, all boredom is a form of fear, right? It's a form of fear of not doing, not being, having to face your beingness. That's all boredom is. And so when someone says, I don't want to sit alone because it's so boring, I get restless. Well, the reason why you're bored, the reason why you're restless is because you're trying to avoid that which is inside you, that which you put there, whether you meant to or not, that which has become a part of your personality and your psyche. And you have to kind of face it, and we just don't want to. We spend our lives building the outside as doers, We're more human doers than we are human beings, and we spend our entire lives creating this persona of a doer, We put on the bling and put on the college degrees or the education or the success seeking and the cars and the houses and the people we hang with, whatever, just so that we appear like someone who doesn't have a problem sitting alone by themselves. We don't want anyone else to see the mess that's inside us. So we cover it all up with all these personalities and personas and these images of who we want others to believe we are and who we want to believe we are, because we get so lost in that we start to believe that we are that image we've been creating for others, that we're just simply bearing the true self underneath. And so we run from our messes that way by creating these personas, and we do everything to maintain them. But when you're in a room alone and you don't have the acerber effect going on, right? You just have you to deal with and no one to impress. And you're just sitting there and you're feeling it all, the stuff that you've been hiding from others coming to the surface. It's a very, very uncomfortable experience. And it's an experience that goes way beyond boredom. And it's actually a fear experience. And so it's very, very normal, is what I want to say, to not want to sit in a room alone. It takes great diligence. It takes great commitment and willingness to face that discomfort and to do things like meditate or to be by yourself or, spend more time with you and to explore eventually, hopefully, once you get past the discomfort of sitting in a room alone, to allow, first of all, whatever is there to come up to the surface. And that's one of the first things about meditation is we relax into what is. Instead of avoiding it and keeping pushing it down, you got to allow it. Whatever thoughts in your head are there, you got to allow them. You don't swish them away. You just notice them and you try not to follow them, and that's your goal in meditation. But you can't stop thinking. There's non-stop thinking, and you can't do anything about it. That's what the mind does. The mind thinks. So when you start allowing the mind to do that and just observing from a distance the thoughts and noticing the thoughts, and then you'll notice the feelings as they come up and notice the discomfort you have over the feelings and thoughts that are coming up, and You notice the resistance you have to those feelings and thoughts, and then you get past the resistance to noticing, what caused them. Look deeply into them. Where are they coming from? Why are they there? Is that a core belief I have? I can't believe I believe that about myself. I can't believe that I think that way. I can't believe that I feel that way. I can't believe that that's the personality I created. What a mess. And eventually we get beyond all that even when we sit in meditation long enough, when we get past that resistance to sitting alone quietly in a room. When we get past that, we can begin to fall back from that thing we created with all its messy and noisy, stuff we're trying to avoid. And we fall into who we truly are. And we start to realize all the stuff that was making us not want to sit in a room alone is not who we are anyway. And we discover the freedom of being who we truly are, which exists beneath that mask. And eventually, after much practice, we begin to look forward, very much so, to sitting quietly in a room alone. Wow, did I ever go off? My alarm is up. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have an amazing day. Namaste.